it's an honor to have you here as survivors, and it's a great honor for me. And it's more than an honor to speak in front of you, and I think there's nothing I can explain you about the Holocaust or about Auschwitz. So the Auschwitz Album, as you could see, I put it in quotes because we always talk about the Auschwitz Album, but actually it's not the Auschwitz Album, it's an Auschwitz Album. There's so many other albums on Auschwitz, but this album became the iconic album. These images became iconic images, like the symbol of the Holocaust, the symbol of Auschwitz, the symbol of the mass murder of the Jews from Hungary. And I say Jews from Hungary because not all deportees from Hungary were Hungarians, many others were Slovakians, Germans, Czechs, who lived in Hungary and were deported to Auschwitz. The so-called Hungarian action, the SS called it Ungarn-Aktion or Sonderprogramm Ungarn-Aktion. It means the deportation of over 450,000 people in less than 6 weeks to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and the mass murder of over 320,000 people in less than 6 weeks. So I think even these numbers are so unbelievable. Over 320,000 people being killed between mid-May and early July 1944. We started this project 5 years ago, and we are publishing a book on the album. It won't be an edition because we have the edition by Yad Vashem, and we have an edition by Serge Klaasfeld, and we have many other editions of the Auschwitz album. So it won't be another edition. It will be a real critical analysis of the photos. Because many of these photos were reproduced and just reproduce the view of the SS and reproduce how the SS created their own interpretation with the album. So what we do is we deconstruct the album first and then kind of reconstruct the actual photo series. Because what you see in the album are many different photos that were not taken at the same day, mixed together to tell a story. And we have to break that story and kind of bring the photos back to the real order. And we, that means Dr Stefan Hördler, he's a German colleague, he was a curator at the Jewish Museum in Berlin and is working with the memorial at the Wannsee House. And Tal Brückmann, a French colleague who lost part of his family in Auschwitz as well. So we started this project in 2014. We all met in Boston at a conference, and that was a starting point to actually reanalyze these photos and finally publish the results. So, as I said, there are many other Auschwitz photos and albums. I will also compare another album. It's called the Höcker Album. It's named after the adjutant Karl Höcker, who was pretty much the right hand of the Auschwitz camp commandant from May 44 till January 45. So these pictures were taken at the same time as these photos of the Auschwitz album were taken. Just a few words to the introduction of the album. The album was found in Dora. Why was it found there? The Mittelbau concentration camp, Dora is just the main camp with like 40 sub-camps in the Harz Mountains. It's near Nordhausen. You probably don't know it. It's today Thuringia, the state of Thuringia in Germany. So why there? Well, after Auschwitz was evacuated by the SS in January 45, they deported thousands of prisoners to all the remaining concentration camps. And of course, the SS guards were transferred to other concentration camps as well. But the camp administration was also transferred. It didn't stay in Auschwitz. So they moved all the stuff to the west. And the new place for the Auschwitz personnel and the new place for the former Auschwitz administration became the Mittelbau camp. And you even have letters in February 45 written to Auschwitz concentration camp, CO Mittelbau concentration camp. So they emptied many barracks at the Mittelbau camp and put and stored all files of Auschwitz there. And that's the reason why you have many originals from the Auschwitz camp administration in Washington, D.C. today. Because Mittelbau Dora was liberated by the US Army, so they found at least a few remaining files and they took them back to the US. And now they are in the National Archives in the United States. And of course, in the first place you think, well, Auschwitz was liberated by the Red Army, so you should go to Moscow to find the files. But actually you have to trace the files until the very end, until the liberation, and then you get to the source. And the US Army prepared a big Auschwitz trial. It never took place because they extradited the perpetrators to Poland, and so the Auschwitz trials took place in Warsaw and in Krakow. But the files are still there. And one of the persons who was transferred to Mittelbau, pretty much everybody was transferred. The Auschwitz camp commandant became the new camp commandant of the Mittelbau camp. The chief physician of Auschwitz became the new chief physician in Mittelbau, all in February 45. The same with the deputy camp commandant, with the first labor chief, with the administration, everybody. And the photographer of this album. So he brought his own private copy to Dora. And that's the place where it was found by Lily Jakob, because she was also deported to Dora. She was deported to Auschwitz first, then to Groß-Rosen, and then in March 45 deported to Dora. And she found the album, she opened the album, and she saw their own brothers, the rabbi, her grandparents. Then she closed the album and took it with her. And it took many years, and we just talked about it, until she handed it over to Yad Vashem to make it accessible also for the public. So that's why this album is highly connected, and even your father, Lillian, he was deported to Auschwitz at that time, and he was also a prisoner of Dora. So the Mittelbau camp and the Auschwitz camp are highly connected. Before I go into the album, I go a step back to the 1930s, because it's very important to understand that the Auschwitz album shows the deportees and victims. But this album was made by the SS. So it's not victim photography, it's perpetrator photography. And that's why I have this also in my subtitle. And I want to show you very few examples of perpetrator photography first, because this is the view you find in the album as well. And of course, it's a very racist view in the album. Like they try to find the typical image of the Jew, and of the Jew that was deported, the Jew, of course, that necessarily had to go to the gas chamber. And later on in the album, they added another series of images, the ones that were selected for forced labor, because it was not convenient anymore in mid-1944 to only photograph people that are going to die, because at that time, especially the Third Reich needed forced laborers for the armament industries, so they had to prove that at least they selected a few to work for the German Reich. In total, that's the result we have right now. There were about 50 copies of this album, and this is the only copy that survived. This album was an album of deported people that were deported to Auschwitz. This album was cleaned and reused by the SS. And we're not sure how the other 14 copies might look like. They might look different. As you know from other reports about the Warsaw Uprising, there are also two albums. They don't look the same way, they look differently. The Schwulenpot, you might have heard it. And this album was produced as proof that the whole mass murder went very well organized, everything in order, no disorder. And you could see how the SS tried on the image, on the photos, to produce that image, that selection were just properly done. That of course people that were selected for the gas chamber were selected by reason, and the others who were selected for forced labor were selected because they're really valuable. And of course they photographed this possession, the robbery of private possessions. So all that is in the album, and we think that there was also a report, a written report, like the Aktion Reinhardt, with the legal washing, but we don't have this report anymore. So there's a lot of background that surrounds this album, but it's important to understand because this gives the album a whole different context. I start with an album of a camp commandant, Karl Otto Koch. Karl Otto Koch was the camp commandant of several concentration camps. Sachsenburg, all these early camps in the 30s. Columbia was in Berlin. He was working at Easterling and the other camps. And he was the camp commandant of Sachsenhausen until 1937 and then became the camp commandant of Buchenwald. And he created many albums, beginning in 30, even in the 20s, private albums, but beginning with his first position in the camp system. He photographed pretty much everything. This is an album that was just discovered a few years ago, the album of Buchenwald from 37 until 41. And this is the so-called Reichskristallnacht, November 38, the deportation of thousands of Jews, especially men, to the concentration camps, mainly Sachsenhausen and Buchenwald. And this page you can see here, Judenaktion, November 38. So you have this racial view and dehumanizing the people. This is also what kind of shaped the image of the Holocaust, people sitting on the roll call place and the hat being shaved. You can see this in very fictional movies. You always, this is like an image that's transported. So this image was already used by the SS. So you have these racist views in the very early images already in the 1930s. But you have to be very careful because there is not like one view of the perpetrator that can be shared by everyone. So if I take this image, it's also a concentration camp in 1934, just 4 years before, Lichtenburg, the main concentration camp in Prussia. These are prisoners, concentration camp prisoners, and also prisoners who cut their hair, and these are SS guards. The same situation, totally different. So there's no racist view on it. And you can see the radicalization over years between 33, 34 until the late 30s and beginning of World War II. And this is Wolfgang Langhoff, who was the composer of the song Moorsoldaten, that's very famous, it's related to the Eastern camps and still sung by many survivors of the camp system. So you can see this. So what's racism? And these perpetrators, they're racist, but they're able to have total different views. The same with that. Let's take in 1940 in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The non-commissional officer, it's not working, this guy, He's a non-commissioned officer in the Sachsenhausen camp. 1 year later, he participated in the shooting of over 12,000 Soviet POWs. So he was a mass murderer. And the man in the middle, he's a Cuban artist who just had a show at the concentration camp in Sachsenhausen for the SS. So the SS guards have no problem posing with him on the photo. So they're racist, but on the other side, it's not a problem to pose in a photo with Cuban artists. What I'm saying is, it's complicated, and there's not a single answer. There are many, and as we just talked about it, and as more answers you get, the more questions are raised. So if you dug very deep, you find more that's even more disturbing. The same with that. When we focus on perpetrators in the camp system, we always focus on the camp system. But we have to understand that many of these people were also participating in combat service, because there was always an exchange between the camp system and the fighting units at the front. And all belong to the Waffen-SS. It's a myth that the camp guards were one group and the Waffen-SS were another group. No, the Waffen-SS, that's a group of the fighting, the combat units, and the concentration camp guards. So there was a transfer the whole time. So the people we can see here, that's a former camp commandant of Flossenburg, another former camp commandant. That's a movie of Jerusalem, and these people are just training Muslims for the Waffen-SS. So it gets complicated, because now, after 43, they're not talking about Germany and the Aryan fighting anymore, they are talking about Europe and anti-Jewish Bolshevism. So even the propaganda changes. These are the same people who committed mass murder at the same time. And coming to a very important topic, when we talk about image, and the image of the Holocaust, we also have to talk about imagination and the imagination of the Holocaust, because that what comes from the younger generations, they don't have the image of the Holocaust, but they have an imagination what the Holocaust might have been. And you see here on the left, Arnold Goethe, the camp commandant of the Prussian concentration camp in Krakow. And on the right side, that's still image from the movie Schindler's List from Steven Spielberg. So left the original, right the movie. And you can see how Spielberg played with the originals. Of course he made changes. On the left, you just see the next house. On the right, you see the camp. It was very important for Spielberg to see the camp. But many people watch Schindler's List, no one knows the left image, only very few. But the movie changed and shaped the image and shaped imagination. Another photo, I got this photo from the grandson of Rudolf Hess, the camp commandant of Auschwitz. This is also perpetrator photography, the private photography. There's not a lot, and you don't have these ego files and ego documents in photography, and it's a colored photo, which is special for the time as well. You see Rudolf Hess right here, new uniform, nice coffee table, the children around him. And this is the villa at Auschwitz I, at the Stammlager, where you have Arbeit macht frei when you enter the camp. And this photo doesn't look special, but when you went to the place and know where the house is and was, and where the garden was, then you might wonder about this chimney, because this is crematorium 1. So this is how close it gets. And this is still an understudied topic of families at these sites. So, not only Rudolf Höss, but also his wife, his children, and other families who lived at these places very close to mass murder. Now I come to the background of the so-called Ungarnation, the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of Jews that were deported from Hungary. And as you might know, in March 1944, Hungary was occupied by the Wehrmacht, and Eichmann and others immediately started to plan the deportation. And there were two lines. They were actually not conflicted, but seemed to be very different. One line was mainly driven by the so-called Reichssicherheitshauptamt, that security police, Gestapo, which means deportation and mass murder. And the others, especially in summer 1944, with the losing war, to get access to as many forced laborers as they can. At the end, for both sides, it was always okay to kill thousands of people. But Hitler himself, the chief of the SS, promised to bring 200,000 Jews into the Reich as forced laborers for the armament industries. And that's what he promised in May. He never could keep his promise because he killed many more. So he selected only over 150,000 in total for forced labor. This is a document that started the whole reorganization of the Auschwitz complex in terms of the mass murder, because Rudolf Höss, the camp commandant of Auschwitz, was not the camp commandant anymore because he stepped up in his career. In fall 1943, he was sent back to Auschwitz in 1944 because he was the expert to deal with that. This document, by the way, is in Q. We will talk about it tomorrow, British Investigations on the Holocaust. And it's in German, but what's written there is that Höss, who has a new position, goes back to Auschwitz to be in charge of the Ungarnation to forward the people that are arriving, and forward means killing. And the source we just discovered a couple of months ago, and that's a source that lies in the basement pretty much. It's a company source, because the image you have of Auschwitz, especially of Auschwitz-Birkenau, is the gate and the ramp. The train goes through the gate, and you are in the camp, and then the selection takes place at the gate, on the ramp. But this ramp didn't exist before May 1944. Until then, all transports arrived outside of Birkenau, and the people were selected outside of the camp, and then transported by trucks, or just went by foot, into the camp. And when this mass murder was planned, they finished the ramp. The ramp was planned since 1941, but there was never a reason to really finish it. But when Höss came back, he said, well, it needs to be finished before the first transport comes. And there's a collection of the German company, it's a regular German company that actually builds this ramp. And they have their reports. What happened, how's the weather, how many concentration camp prisoners were forced to build the ramp. And they were just discovered a few years ago, small handwritten, subtly handwritten notes, so no one recognized it. But what's also in these daily reports is when do the transfers come in? And this is a note of May 16, 1944, telling that 1:50 p.m. the first transport arrived. And this is the starting point for the album. Because it was important to show that the transports went into Birkenau and that the selection took place on the new ramp. So they didn't make any photo of selections outside of the camp at the old ramp. It was very important to show that with this new ramp, they were able to deal with even more deportees at the same time. So now we have 4 pages out of the album, and I know it's hard to tell the difference because I colored them not well enough, I see. This is red, this is orange, this is green, and on the top there's brown. I know it's hard to tell. But the only thing I want to point out is on these 4 pages that follow in the album, we have 4 different transports and 4 different photo series that are all mixed together and don't have any relation. Which means that we had to take every single photo out to bring them in the original order they were taking. So we had to find out when was this photo taken, what transport is it, what people were deported, and who was actually selecting the people. Because the SS at the end, they didn't care what transport they were mixing. They were creating a story of a transport that comes in, that's selected, people go to a gas chamber, others survive, and at the end they just rob all the possessions. And this is also the story that was told so far, the story of one transport. So I just took one series out of the album. That's actually the series Lily Jakob arrived with. That's the transport of May 26th. And this is the original order the photos were taking. This order is not in the album, so you can see the middle of the ramp, the track passing, the camera follows the track, and all the other photos. Why does the camera follow the track? The most important thing for the SS photographer were these people. Because these are the high-ranking SS officers and camp commandants who were there at that day for an inspection. So it's not a coincidence that the SS photographers were there at that day to make the photos, because they wanted also to catch the leading SS officers who didn't sit behind the table, who were really there at that day. And here we have another series of a photo. You can see that they try, we have I think 16 examples of it where they try to have 3 photos that have a panorama. There are 2 SS photographers who created this album. One is Ernst Hofmann, he was a teacher in Thuringia, and the other one, Bernhard Walter, who didn't have any relations with photography as well. So these are very iconic images on the Holocaust, but quality-wise, very pure images, because they were not trained photographers. And Ernst Hofmann, he's the one who creates these panorama images. And I will show other examples of the second photographer. And sometimes you have this, you have the panorama with the missing photo. So there are many reasons why this photo was taken out. Maybe it was showing violence, and this was not supposed to be in the album. Maybe it was just bad lighting, bad quality. I will come to this further later on again to explain the perspectives of the perpetrators. And the question we always had, and this was very important for us to prove, do all photos in this album definitely show transports from Hungary? Because at the same time, between May and July 44, there were also transports coming in from France and many other countries that were deported to Auschwitz, selected and killed. So we analyzed, that was especially Todd, we analyzed all stars they had to wear and compared them with the stars they had to create themselves in Hungary before they were deported. And we could prove that all of them were created in Hungary. There's not a single one that was created in France or other places. So all photos in this album were from transfers from Hungary. This is important because this was not sure, and we had to be sure when we analyzed it as like the Hungarian action. The second photo album, these photos were taken at the same time by the same photographers. That's the album of Karl Höckler. The album was discovered at the end of 2006 and handed over to the US Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. in 2007. This is collage, so this is not one photo, so it's a creation of two photos. We have the camp commandant, and we have Karl Höckler, his adjutant. Both were promoted on June 21st and 44 for participating in the mass murder. This is the first page of the album, and together with Jan van Pelt and Christoph Busch, we edited the album in 2016. It took us 8 years to analyze the album because there were loose pages, all not in order, and only 2 pages were dated, and other ones were not even dated with no name on it. So when this album was discovered, this is like the German magazine Der Spiegel, the Mirror. These photos went around the whole world showing Mengele, the only photos of Josef Mengele in Auschwitz, Rudolf Hess, the camp commandant, Josef Kramer, the commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and, as it said here, an unknown SS officer. It took me 2 years to find out who that is, and that's him again. This photo was taken in 41 in Großrosen. It's Anton Thumann. Anton Thumann was the deputy camp commandant of Lublin, the Lublin concentration camp, until April 44, and then went to Neuengamme and stayed there until April 45. Officially, he was never in Auschwitz. His SS file is that thick. Auschwitz is not mentioned with a single word. No order. He was never officially transferred, nothing. And now we have to understand that for that mass murder action, they informally sent so many people to Auschwitz to participate in the mass murder that these photos are the only source we have that actually show the people that were participating in the mass murder. There is no written source, and it's not that there were a source and that the sources were destroyed before the World War II ended. No, these sources were never created. These people were just sent by an order given on the phone to Auschwitz and then came back after 6 weeks. So that's why you have many people on the photo that were officially never staff of the Auschwitz camp. What the photo albums show as well are networks in both albums. The Auschwitz album, the so-called Lily Jakob album, and the Höckler album. So we have this image again of Bea and Höckler. This photo was taken in 42 in Neuengamme. Bea and Höckler. They knew each other for many, many years. It's not a coincidence that these people are there. So these networks operate over many years on places and very often connected with mass murder and create a group of so-called killing experts that move from one place to another when it comes to mass murder actions. And now we have the photo, you remember the truck passing by from the series. And you have me over here, in the middle of the ramp. So it was very important for the photographer to catch the camp commandant who is in the middle of the whole selection process. So we had identification by the face, by the rank, but also by the uniform. I know it gets nerdy, but this is an expertise we have to include because there is unfortunately no serious publication on uniforms, German uniforms, military uniforms in World War II. This field is pretty much left to military and right-wing persons, unfortunately. But this really helps to prove 100% that people are on the photo. So we have Richard Beer, who has an Iron Cross second class, and he has seen an Eastern Front medal, so for Winterschlacht medaille, Eastern Front medal. It's very rare that they both have that. You can see it, yes, both. It's a bad resolution, but on the higher one you can see that. Secondly, he has this little triangle. That's only for people who are very old Nazi party members, who were party members before 1933. He has that too. Plus, Richard Beer was the only one in Auschwitz who had this black stripe on his uniform telling SS Death Pact Division. So he was at the Eastern Front before he was wounded and then sent back to the camp system in 42. That was a photo of my gun I showed before. He was not allowed to wear that. You can only wear these stripes, these insignia, when you're really in front service. When you're back, you have to take it off. He didn't take it off. And of course no one corrected him, he was the camp commandant. But at that time he was the only one who had all these insignias in Auschwitz. And why did he wear it? To show, and this is the explanation of self-perception of the SS, a men's club. They don't call themselves an elites. That's something that comes after 45. But a men's club that proved that they fought for Germany at the front. So he uses two different hierarchies in the camp. One was his own rank, and being a camp commandant. On the other side, playing with the military insignia, proving that he served for Germany at the front, that he was wounded, and of course had the Iron Cross second and the Iron Cross first class. Hess had the Iron Cross first class too, but from World War I. And in his personal memories after 45, Hess always stated that he always wanted to prove in World War II as well that he would fight for Germany. And you can see how they play with that. And both were really had a high competition. And you can see this with other people as well, and also in the albums. This is the chief doctor of Sachsenhausen who wears the German eagle at the uniform, but this is not the eagle that was worn by the SS. This was worn by the Wehrmacht. So why does he wear an eagle from the Wehrmacht on the SS uniform? He wants to prove that he went to combat service so early that at that time they didn't have enough uniforms for all the SS volunteers. So they had to give them Wehrmacht uniforms, regular German uniforms, and just change the colors to the SS. So this is another way of proving and playing with hierarchies. And we have here the private album. This is also from the grandson of Concord, and you see that he wears also the insignia of the division and the same as Bear does. So people play with it, and there are only very few. So you can identify them with that insignia in the Auschwitz album. This is a page out of the Hördler album. This is July 15th, 1944, at the Solarhütte, SS recreation center very close to Auschwitz. What they do there is they celebrate the success of the Ungarn Aktion and the killing of over 320,000 people. So the people who are on these photos are the perpetrators who were highly involved in the killings. And this, I think, is the most important photo in that series. It shows over 70 people. And we have Höss, Bear, Mengele, but we also have this guy with a bullet hat. He's the chief of a gas chamber. We have this one, Voss, he's also chief of a gas chamber. Moosfeld, he's the chief of a gas chamber. He's the chief of a gas chamber. So, these are the people who are really in charge. And we didn't know before we discovered that photo because there is no written source. And it took me years to identify these people on the photo because we just didn't have any source. So this is the only source that tells us who were the people who were participating in this mass murder. And also this guy, he was in charge of the transportation service. He was driving the old people, the children in the trucks who couldn't walk. He was driving the Cyclone E. He was driving the personal belongings. And these are all his drivers. This one was a witness later on in the Auschwitz trial, and this one was especially the one who was responsible to drive the Cyclone B to the gas chambers. And we have this man, over 2 meters high, very tall. This man was officially never in Auschwitz. He became the administration chief of Auschwitz-Monowitz, Auschwitz III, in August 44. But he was there during the whole time between May and July. At that time he was still officially belonging to the staff of the Flossenburg concentration camp in Bavaria. And we see him here. And now I switch to the Auschwitz album, the Jakob album, and we see a page that's called Aussortierung, selection. And here we see him again. Which means, by comparing these two albums, we were able to identify the perpetrators in the Jakob album. These identifications wouldn't have been possible without the Hördler album. This is very crucial because these people were not officially as Auschwitz staff. So only with the Hördler album we knew that these people were in Auschwitz. And this photo was taken by Bernhard Walter. Walter is the one who tries always to have the image from top, who likes to create lines. I tried to point out that these photos were not snapshots, they were created. So he was very eager to draw the lines, and when you follow the lines, the line of the train, the line of the people that were lined up for selection, and the line of the fence, they all end right in the gate of Birkenau. What it makes is that the group on the photo look huge. and very well organized. And this was like the intention. Everything had to look very organized, very well in order. And we counted the people, there were only a few hundred on the ramp. So this is a creation of the SS. Secondly, and I will jump over it, SS men, they were here, and the same men here. So with that we could connect the series and the photo to bring them together. We connected them by the deportees and by the perpetrators to have a double proof that this is really the same transport. And we could identify people like Bruno Schatz, he's here. This is the Hördler album. This is the Lily Jakob album. And that same being accused in the Frankfurt Auschwitz trial. He was sentenced free because they couldn't prove his participation in the selection. And the album was an exhibit in the Frankfurt Auschwitz trial. But he's there, he's at least on 5-6 photos in the album. And this judge, especially in the Frankfurt Auschwitz trial, created also the story because Schatz was a dentist and created the story that dentists didn't participate in the selection. Of course, they participated in stealing the gold teeth and many other things after people were killed. But even dentists participated. I want to point out another photo that just doesn't look very special. You see the deportees, you see SS men as guards, and you ask yourself, why did the SS photographer focus on this photo, and why is it so important to catch the guards in the background? The reason is that there were training materials for SS guards how to behave properly. These are the training materials of the Auschwitz concentration camp from 1943, just a few months, November 43, just a few months before the deportation started. And you see drawings of concentration camp guards, false, right. So this is false. And this is right. So what they want to prove on the photo is that everything is right and correct, as guards were trained. So even that intention is in the album. It's not about deportation anymore, it's just about the proper behavior of SS men in the camp. You have many other details. I will just go through very quickly. Young SS men walking here. If you go in, you see all the insignia on the uniforms. These insignia are not Iron Cross second class. This is a War Merit Cross. A War Merit Cross is not given for combat service. This was only given for participation for mass murder, especially for non-commissioned officers and low SS rank men. Like these men, these were just very low SS ranks. And this War Merit Cross with swords had always the reason of actively and voluntarily participating in the mass murder. This is very important. So these people you see there in the album are not random people. These people are there every day and participating in the mass murder every day. The same with this man, Stefan Hördler. He was accused in the Frankfurt Auschwitz trial and he was sentenced because he was identified through that photo. And this is a document that is in the US. I just talked about the Auschwitz files that are at the National Archives in the United States. So this is where all these files are from. And there you have him, Dr Stefan. And given the War Cross with swords, second class with swords, in German Kriegsverdienstkreuz KVK. The same with this man in the middle. This is Heinz Kilo, a physician, SS officer. He's selecting. He was also giving the War Cross second class with swords. And there's also the reason, because he participated in special duties. I come to the last slides to show certain perspectives of the album. And before I do so, I wanted to show you just a map of Birkenau so that you have an imagination of the spaces that were used. So this is the old ramp where deportation transports arrived before May 44, and the new ramp is this. This is the women's camp, this is section 2, and this is so-called Mexico on the other side. And this is the gate. Here we have crematorium 2 and 3 with the gas chambers, and over here 4 and 5 with the gas chambers. And we have this photo. This photo was taken in the little forest just in front of crematorium 4 and 5. Just going back, this is right here. Do you see that little water? This is where this man is going to. And you see this woman or child already taking water out. Why does the SS make a photo of that? It's a very cynical photo. It's a very brutal photo. Because the ashes of the burned were dumped into the water. And the photographer just wants to make a photo to show how the next being killed in a few minutes take the water out of the ashes, out of their own deported and killed before. So many people say there's no violence in the album. There is, but what's visible and what's not. So you have to understand the perspectives of the photographer. They play with their knowledge. They play with their view. And you have many of these cynical photos in the album. You remember this photo in the beginning? Why was this photo taken? This is crematorium number 3. Just going back. This is here. The group stands right here. And this is crematorium number 2. So the photographer stands right at the entrance of gas chamber number 2, just before the people go in, and plays with the backgrounds, with the album on the other side, showing what's going to happen next. And of course the victims don't know, but he knows, and he plays with the perspective of his knowledge. The same here. This is in the back, the crematorium number 4. And we went to Auschwitz so many times and we located every single photo exactly in the album and on the original site. And even some trees are still there. So, on that photo, the photographer was staying right at the stairs of the gas chamber. And the stairs are still there. The basement of crematorium 4 and 5 are still existing. So we could exactly locate it. So the photographer was staying in the door of the gas chamber, taking a photo how men take their own people into the gas chamber. This is a very brutal photo that were mostly taken by Ernst Hoffmann. He's the one who takes the cynical photos. The artist of the SS photographers is Bernhard Walter, who climbs on the train and takes the photos from top. Another photo, the stealing of the property. This is smoke. And this is the smoke of the burning pipes that were right next to the crematorium 4 and 5. You can see the chimneys of crematorium 4 and crematorium 5. And because they couldn't burn all corpses in the crematorium, they piled up people to burn them outside of the crematorium. So this is the smoke. So you can see the burning of the corpses in the photos. There are many others where you can see even the crematorium smoking. You don't see it in the regular photo, but with Photoshop and the shadows you can see the crematorium smoking in the back. And in the very end of this talk, I want to come to things you don't see. There are many things out of sight. You can't see noise. You can't see smell. You can't see movement. So there are many things you cannot see. So this is obviously smell. You cannot see, but it's there. And what you can also see is, you don't see Auschwitz. It's an album on Auschwitz, but you don't see Auschwitz. You don't see the camp. You see the selection, you see property, you see possession, you see people selected for the gas chamber, you see the crematorium, but you don't see Auschwitz. You don't see the actual camp. Because the crematorium, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, they were separate zones outside of the actual camp. So this album is an Auschwitz album without showing the camp at all. This is one of the very few images. It must be Sunday because that's the only day when it was allowed to stay outside and clean the clothes. So in the back you see Auschwitz concentration camp prisoners, and these are women that were selected for forced labor. But this is but you don't see the camp itself. And what you also don't see are people that are registered as Auschwitz concentration camp prisoners. And Lillian and I, we talked about also your father who stayed there only for a few days and then was deported to Buchenwald and officially never registered as an Auschwitz prisoner. So this is one of the very few photos where we see it too. So these people were actually registered and tattooed in Birkenau. This photo was taken in August. This is a series that was added later on because Hitler wasn't obviously satisfied with only showing people sent to the gas chamber, so he wanted to have people sent to forced labor to Germany to prove that, of course, he had to keep his promise to send 200,000 people to Germany. One thing we still don't know is this is not a typical concentration camp prisoner uniform. Starved in a very different way. We still don't know the actual purpose of this particular cloth. And last but not least, they're like the little things you see. And analytically, they are not important, but you see them. A woman sticking out her tongue to the photographer. Just the little signs of action by deportees. Very often overlooked, but these are like the little things when you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you see in the photos. And we just published an article, it's it was first published in French and then translated to English. I think that's something I sent to you as well. It's on the album, and especially talking about the value as a historical source to explain the Holocaust. And this is the book that's coming up in fall this year. On the Liliaco album, it won't be, as I said in the beginning, it won't be an edition. It will be deconstructing the album in the first place and then reconstructing the individual cases, the series, explain what you see, to zoom in and explain the context of the photos. Thank you very much.
Did you use facial recognition software to cross-reference images, or was it done by eye?
Yes, I did. Since 2012, I'm working also as a consultant for many courts, also for the US government and the German government in Nazi war trials. So I was consulting the Oscar Gröning trial in Lüneburg 2015 and 16, the Hungarian trial. And also in the US, the trial against Johann Breyer. So I was working very close with the police and learned a lot. On the other side, I have a database of around 40,000 SS men and women that served in the camp system, and made and compared many images for many years to be sure that this is a person. If we are not 100% sure, we don't name the person. We do that only if we think that we have a high percentage in face recognition and a 100% in the uniform.
At the beginning of the lecture, you told us that the photograph albums weren't in chronological order very often, and you worked very hard to put them in chronological order. Can you give us a rough idea of how you managed to identify near enough the dates of these photographs?
Of the Hördler album or of the Liliaco album? Or both?
Both are right.
Okay. With the Hördler album, we first had to identify all the persons who are on there and find the background, why was this photo actually taken. And then at the end sometimes found, for instance, for July 15th, we found a signed paper by Hördler where he orders a bus to go to Zollernhütte, where the SS Reparation Center is. And then we analyzed all orders that were given in Auschwitz over the whole time. July 15th is a Saturday. On Tuesday, the last transport in the series from Hungary arrived. It took 1 or 2 days to select, to kill, and to burn. Hess was there the whole time. On Friday, he signs his last order. On Saturdays, they celebrate. On Sunday, he goes back to Berlin. On Monday, Richard Beer signs his first order as camp commandant. So it's very precise, but it takes a while. It's not just looking into the Kommandanturbefehle or orders and then the explanation is right there. The same with the Liliaco album. In the company reports, we have also statements on the weather: cloudy, sunny, rainy. So we ordered all photos on rainy days on one side, cloudy, sunny. This took forever. For every photo, we analyzed the angle of the sun. So when we traveled very often to Auschwitz, so we tried to travel there at the same day and measured the angle of the sun to determine that this photo was taken at 8:30. Then we have sometimes another perspective, so we could explain that, for instance, it took around 90 minutes to select 3,000 people. It goes very quick. takes only 19 minutes for the SS to arrive at transport, to take the people out, to select them, and then the transport is empty. And this is with the sun. There's also, on a few photos, the full moon on day. This is only one particular day in August 44, so we could date this photo. So annual sun, moon, so this all plays a role. We compared the construction because the ramp was not finished. The first transport arrived on May 16th, but at that time they were still working on the ramp. So sometimes you can see trains on the railways that are not deportation trains. These are construction trains. So in the reports, they say there's a train with wagon number 70,344 arriving and bringing stone, woods, whatever. So we identified all the numbers on the trains and put them into order that on that day the train with stone arrived with these numbers of wagons, so it's that day. And you see deportees in front of these trains, but this is not the train where they got off. This is just the train in the background to continue the construction of the ramp. And so on and so forth. And also if you look on the deportation trains, you see always a number, two numbers and one name. So you see, for instance, it's also in the exhibition 1171 and a name. That means wagon number 11, 71 deportees in that wagon. And for instance, Ferenc Kaufmann, he was the person in charge of the wagon. And because we always write the last name first, Kaufmann Ferenc, it's sure that this was written in Hungary, not because the Germans would never do that. The Germans will always write the first name first and then the second name. So with that, we went to ITS and identified all the persons who were on the train to see if this is the transfer photographer from Hungarian and so on and so forth. It gets really detailed at the end, but it's the only way. And then you have the full image.